Welcome. Thanks for joining us when we discuss city innovation in the time of a pandemic. My name is Mark Thomas. I'm the Managing Director of ServiceWorks. We're a smart cities enterprise. I'm based in Auckland, New Zealand, but we work across different parts of Asia. And I'm joined today by ANITA CHEN, who's the Deputy Director General of GoSmart. She's based in Taipei, Taiwan. And GoSmart's an international network of smart cities. And our third panelist today is ZOE EATHER, who's the CEO of My Smart Community. My Smart Community is a consulting and media services enterprise, and she's based in Queensland, Australia, and she runs the very popular My Community podcast, if you haven't caught that yet. So the context that we have is this crisis, and what we're looking for is to try to encourage urbanists to keep the innovations that many of us have been forced to do going. A crisis, we know, is classically the time for innovations, but after 18, 20 months, it gets weary. So let's give some insights into how we can kind of maintain the momentum and maybe in some enterprises make innovation part of the DNA. So let me turn first to ANITA. ANITA, which cities in Taiwan responded well to the COVID impact on city operations from your perspective?
I think Taiwan's performance of reacting to the COVID is pretty good nationally, and plus that's where I'm from, so maybe I could take an example from Taiwan. So something I would like to mention in the beginning is Taipei, which is the capital of Taiwan, and Taipei has its smart city PMO since 2015, so it actually facilitated a lot of proof of concept project many years ago, and the mechanism has been very mature. So there's a recall that when the pandemic just broke out and the medical mask was very short, has the shortage. So people had to, actually, at least in Taiwan, people need to wait for a long line and carrying their health insurance card for buying the mask. So in this moment that the Taipei city government, they actually use the proof of concept project and cooperate with the industry, launch the medical mask vending machine. So it actually connect to the database, to the central government's national insurance data. And usually these kind of, even smart city office, they have a mechanism, but usually the process took like 3 to 6 months for the contract to the dealing. But because of the pandemic, they need to speed up the process. And I think that's the force to push that the government need to speed up the innovation. That's something good, because it can become the pilot project.
That's a terrific insight, ANITA. So did the government or the city have to pass a new law or a new regulation, or did they just find a new way to work because of the priority?
They need to pass the new regulation, to adapt the citizens' need.
Great, but and COVID, the pandemic, was obviously the catalyst for that. So do you think that kind of change will become more of a permanent or more normal way for the city to work?
I think so. And people become, not only citizens, but also the government become more open-minded to adapt to this kind of change. And they don't think that the policy should be all fixed all the time, because the pandemic. So they realize the change could be happen anytime. So I think that's really important. And another thing, sorry, maybe Zoe can share some other. Sorry.
Well, we know, McKinsey told us this. We knew this already. That actually enterprises that kind of have a priority of innovation generally, reveal more than 30% more value. Right, so they're more valuable if they kind of can maintain innovation. So look, that's a terrific example. And let me come back to you, right? Let's bring in Zoe. So you're based in Australia, and particularly you're based in a regional part of Australia. So tell us about some of the smart approaches to COVID city problems that you've come across.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And yes, I'm based in Toowoomba, which is a smallish town in regional Queensland, but have been doing some work around the traps in other states as well. If you don't know, Australia is a fairly big place, so going to the next state, even the next town, is sometimes going to a different country. But thinking about some of the challenges that were faced, we were, particularly local government, weren't really set up to be working at home. And it was like that was nearly an impossible thing that was never going to happen, that, people could work from home, which, these days seems absolutely mind-boggling. Even though some of the consultants, and smaller enterprises and younger people kind of went, well, we want this, but it was always too hard. COVID happened and it became all of a sudden rushing at us, and it really, really had to happen. There were many different things that went along, and it wasn't, so we talk about innovation. This then became, which something was innovation, now absolutely essential for essential services to actually happen. Because if nobody could access their network at home, rates couldn't, get paid, the money couldn't come in, or customers couldn't get, phones, these type of things. So all these things that were innovations down the track in some pipeline that maybe was in some, pipe dream pipeline down the road, they all of a sudden became absolutely essential services. And I work a lot in the smart cities space, smart community space, and that's actually how we should be thinking about these things. These are not new widgets. These are not new things that, are nice to have. These are absolutely essential things that we need to live modern life these days. And also thinking about things that way as well helps us to think about the people with the most at stake if we don't get this right, because they need to be able to access these services as well. But just really quickly, some of the innovations in our town, my hometown, around working from home and that type of thing, they've continued on, because now they go, oh, okay, this is actually possible. So now they're thinking, oh, well, if this is possible, maybe we can have a virtual control center where we bring all these data sources together that we're always talking about, that we want things to be able to make decisions about certain elements, but we just never were able to have them in the same space at the same time. Now we can actually do that, because if we can do this working from home thing, the whole workforce going from home, and we've already set up some of those services, actually can we bring all the data together, the systems together? And so it's really spurred then this new sort of innovation where we go, oh, okay, this smart city thing isn't so crazy and not, about robots and blockchain. It's actually about making better decisions with the data that we have, but also all of the people that we have as well, getting them to think differently.
Look, you remind me, Zoe, of a piece of work that I was part of with the Australian New Zealand Smart Cities Council called Mobility Now. And that was, it was a short piece of work we did 2 years ago about the changes that need to make happen in cities to deal with the mobility that's changing. This was, of course, before COVID. There were 6 key changes. So it's the things you'd think about. It's a different approach to urban design, a different approach to data. But one of the 6 things was exactly what you say, the decision making, right? Because there's no point changing the hard rules if we don't actually get changes within the decision making framework and how people act. So look, that's a terrific insight. And I think this section of our talk really is about the specific, examples that large cities such as Taipei have done, and smaller areas such as Toowoomba have done, to show that you don't have to have scale, right, to make innovation changes in the time of a pandemic. Before we move from this section, I'll just reference one example from my hometown, Auckland, New Zealand. It's a population of 1.7 million, relatively small in global terms. And the thing that our transport agency, Auckland Transport, was able to do in the space of about a week was provide, when COVID first struck and we were all locked in our homes, the ability for those essential workers who had to travel, insight on what the numbers of people on the transport systems were, so in the buses and in the trains. Now, I know some cities provide that as a matter of course. They had the technical tools to have a look on the app to see when the train or bus was coming, but they hadn't actually added the ability to kind of see how many people were on board. And so in terms of course, protecting space, which was a key priority in those COVID times, in the space of, as I say, less than a week, they were able to provide that data on the phone for essential workers. So they could have done it any time, but the pandemic was the catalyst for that particular example. We're going to move now to sort of talking more about, so we've talked about the projects that have changed, but now we want to talk about, what the specific benefits were, and I suppose more about what needs to change within the organisations, be they private sector or cities, to make these changes endemic. And look, I see we've got people on the line from Singapore, from Christchurch, New Zealand, from Oklahoma, and around the world. If you want to pop a question in or make a comment, please do that, and I'll try and weave those into our conversation. So, Anita, back to you. You've told us about a specific COVID-inspired project or that you were doing. Please refer to the other one if you wanted to, or talk more about the benefits, right, that some of those projects have kind of generated.
Okay. It just came up to me another project in Kaohsiung City, which is the second largest city in Taiwan. So we know that it's not encouraged to go out, even purchase during the pandemic, and even Taiwan never been really locked down. And so in this case, that like taxi driver, they had hard time for their business and even supermarket. And so what government do is that they create a platform to integrate the taxi operator network and the operators, and also the most popular messaging app called Line. It's just like WhatsApp in Taiwan. So people can just simply use that messaging app to make order of the grocery or food, and the taxi driver, since they have no other business to do, so they can deliver the food or the purchase. And who gonna pay for the shipping? The government gonna pay for the shipping. So government don't just store the money to the citizen, but they pay for the shipping to the taxi driver, since they also work. And this also push the cater vendors, the traditional, even the street side vendors, and also customer to start to use digitalization, digital payment. And it was really hard before because people get used to the traditional way to pay. But now, since there's some discount and you cannot make this order without using this way, so it's kind of long-term project, and it's have the foresight. So I think that's something is something could affect from the pandemic as well.
Terrific. What was the ability, Anita, within the cities in Taiwan you know about, for them to kind of collaborate? I mean, was every city just really focused on the crisis it was dealing with, or was there an ability to kind of share and learn? And if one city was doing something interesting, like that example you talked about, were cities able to kind of collaborate in the time of a pandemic?
I think since I'm from Taipei, and the Smart Taipei office is Smart Taipei PMO is the earliest PMO established in Taiwan, and they have a more mature mechanism for the public and private partnership work. So I think that's the city that can be considered the most.
Yeah, the leader. So back to Australia, look, talk more about a specific example if you like, but also you're deeply involved with cities. I mean, not just in Australia, but around the world via your podcast. We've seen these great changes. What's been holding cities back, do you think, from making the change? I appreciate that's a tricky question, right? Because there's lots of different reasons in different cities. But what were the things that were holding us back that maybe the pandemic now is the opportunity for us to kind of deal with?
That's a great question, and a big question. And I think there's, like you said, many, many different answers. I think one of the biggest things was that we were going down a certain path. We were thinking about technology. We were, we're trying to improve the way we were doing things. But at the end of the day, we still have business as usual sitting here. Right, and was going, hey, I'm still here. I've still got to do all this stuff. You've got to do all this stuff. And what COVID did was really create that, I guess, circuit breaker where business as usual changed dramatically and changed very differently for many different people. We were all in the same storm, but we were definitely in different boats. So, for me, honestly, I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? But it worked out well. People were thinking more about smart cities and digital technology and infrastructure and all those type of things. But at the very beginning, there was just so much uncertainty for everybody involved. But as a knowledge-based worker, I could work from home. I'm very privileged to be able to do that. But for others, it wasn't the case. And so governments then really had to go, how do we help the people with the most at stake here? And there were so many different things happening, but at the end of the day, we have to make sure our people are okay. So I think that circuit breaker was one of the things that then went, oh, okay, well, what does that actually mean? And when the business as usual stopped or changed, then we could start thinking differently. And it became a matter of urgency that we invested in the right technology, not something that wasn't doing anything. Because we may have decided that 5 years ago, but we were still trying to see the benefits. So maybe we went, oh, actually, this isn't solving a problem. Hang on. We had to shift because we just did not have the time, money, or resources, or time particularly, because this was such an urgent matter that we had to then shift and make sure that the technology and the tools and the data and everything that we were using is actually solving a real problem for people, particularly ones with the most at stake that were most affected by this pandemic. So I think, the business as usual was holding us back because it was always there. And so when that stopped, we could move forward.
Anita, I'm going to ask you the same question, but we've got a question that's come from one of our audience, which I'll put to you first. It's on the vexed issue of data security, really, right? Because now more of us are working from home, and having to share data. That to some extent creates a whole new realm of data sharing security issues. So I suppose any insights from Taipei or Taiwan that you can share about what maybe organizations have had to do to improve that security issue with people working more from home?
I think I have to say that working from home sometimes gives us some disadvantage because before, Taiwan has a lot of typhoon, and sometimes when typhoon comes, we have the holiday for that. But now since the both realize you can just work from home, so there's no any typhoon holiday anymore. That's some, but for the security, since now we work from home just very often, so every city councils, they have the information department, and I think they're the agency to in charge of the data security, and they try to build out the data center. I mean, even almost all the cities, they are trying to do their data centers, and they always consider the privacy and the data security as their priority. So I have to say that they now we still take the privacy regulation from Europe a lot. So that's something we're still learning and still in the process, but that's something that raises our awareness gradually.
Yeah, great. So Europe has been a bit of a, as we know, a bit of a benchmark for reference. So look,
can I add to that, Mark?
Please, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was just thinking about data and like working from home. I think security is a huge one, and privacy. But thinking about how many more nuances have been introduced on data sharing. So, for example, a lot of us are using Teams, and we know that can track, how much focus time we have. How many meetings we're having, who we're talking to, etc., etc. Now, is it fair that is for my eyes only, as it says on the email, or is there a potential that could be shared in the future with my employer, and could that then, be thinking about, oh, well, hang on, between this time and this time, Zoe wasn't doing that, or she's always talking to this person, what's happening? So, not saying that that's a thing that's happening, but I just think it's something. There's these new things that have been introduced on digital like etiquette, but also that privacy issue. It's not, and these things that we haven't had to deal with before, and that's just one example. But there's going to be many, many, many more of these, and I think we really need our privacy professionals included in this, and digital ethics, actually ethics conversation as well, included in these conversations. And I know that's kind of coming down into this detail, but these things are so important in these broader topics that we're talking about.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And let me just come back and set the context for that kind of discussion about how do we embed the changes, the good changes that COVID has driven cities into the future. And I suppose one of the models that I'm familiar with is something that Forbes magazine talked about. Out of COVID, they've decided that there's going to be 4 types of people working in organizations. There'll be the adapters. Those are the people who've coped with the change quite well, and they'll continue to cope with change well. There's the optimizers. They're more about the efficiency thing, right? So how can we make things more efficient? There's the trendsetters. So people who've done new things, like perhaps some of the examples that we've talked about. and they'll continue to do new things, or there's the trailblazers, the people who actually understand that COVID has been a catalyst for change, but actually COVID doesn't have to be the catalyst. We don't need pandemics every year, God help us.
Yeah.
We can try and change the way our organization works to be constantly trailblazing, small or big. So I guess it's a reflection for you in Taipei and with the experiences you've had. What do you think, I suppose, needs to happen to embed innovation more in Taipei and in Taiwan moving forward?
In Taipei, I think we still have a lot of transition culture, and what we try. I think that's one of the reasons that we have the Go Smart platform to collect more experience and to learn more from other cities. So I would like to address one of the examples that we learned from Go Smart Awards, a story we collect from Go Smart Awards, which is from Tehran, which is the capital of Iran. So they have the bazaar and all the street side vendors, they even from outside of Tehran, they went there. And so since the pandemic came out, so the government want to do the better management. So they created app, and from now on, all the street vendors, they need to do the register and the register for their business profile, and they need to do the allocation for the store location, and also the clients, they need to do the register as well, and also as well as the schedule. So in this way that the social distance and the physical distance can be measured by the business size and business type. So that's and also the customer are encouraged to use the smart payment more often, since they can receive some discount or on sale information. So it's another boost of digital economics for the city. So it's another good effect of the from pandemic. Yeah.
And are you,
I think, yeah.
Are you optimistic that there'll be more of these kinds of changes in Taipei?
Yeah, I think so, because I'm seeing more and more people are getting more flexible, because I have to say that in the beginning, in the public sectors and even the private sectors, the employee there, they are encouraged to work from home, but the people who work in government, they say, okay, you are not allowed to work from home since you're official government. But now, since they start to learn from the private sectors and they get more flexibility, and I think a lot of employees from government, they start to use the online meeting system after pandemic. Yeah, so that's something good for them.
So Zoe, the experience in Australia, of course, has been very different depending on the states. But it's sort of any more insights, I suppose, you can share about how to embed the good COVID change in the way cities work?
Yeah, great question. Thinking about and kind of tying it together with working together, as in across regions and cities, I think is important too, because COVID has brought some regions together, because particularly in where I do a lot of spend a lot of my time is in the regional space. And you think regionals, like there's less people but lots of space, right? Lots of land in Australia. They have to work together, because otherwise they cannot get economies of scale. And I think when COVID hit, they went, oh, okay, no, we really have to work together, because actually a lot of people may work for, say, this council, but they live in the next council over, or they live in the next city, or they live just outside the border, which actually caused a lot of issues, particularly when the state borders were closed as well, and continuing to cause issues. But what it meant was they really banded together, and they were already working together, but then there was like this imperative again. And I went down to Victoria when I spoke at a conference down there called DISA, which is Digital Innovation Festival, and it was so great to see all the different councils talking together, and I had a panel where I had all the mayors, or 3 or 4 of the mayors on stage, and they were talking about, oh, we're leading in this space, so yeah, let's share the learnings. And sometimes that doesn't happen, and it's a embedded cultural thing. But when it does happen, so much magic, just happens, because I think when we can actually share the learnings, because we know that each community is unique. However, we have this common thread of problems, and around the world we have this common thread of problems. We may have slightly different solutions for those things, but again, going to the pain point, we can actually name a lot of those things, and then there'll be nuances between, but actually a lot of those things are the same across the board. So we can actually partner and collaborate and work out how we can solve these things together. And one of the biggest ones was, IT, and thinking about investing in new technology. It doesn't make sense to stop, the sensor at the border, because we actually want information beyond the border. So, and also then now there's economies of scale, so it can be bought at a cheaper level from the government, but also the provider then gets a better outcome as well. So if we can start having those conversations, what are those pain points and problems we're trying to solve, we can get people on board, so then the solution is actually across a bigger area, a wider area, and sometimes a virtual, it's not a physical geographic area, it's a virtual area where we can actually collaborate across, around the world based on whatever technology or thing we're investing in.
Look, that's such a great insight. I'm going to, with available time, do a quick final round with both of you on your sort of pithy last few words about what cities, people who work with cities, urbanists need to do to kind of maintain innovation while juggling the stresses of a pandemic. But there's a framework that I like to use when kind of coping with this and working with others. It involves 6 things. 6 things is a bit too much for a list, but it is 6 things. The first thing is, keep your focus and maintain your vision. Whatever the hurly-burly is that you're caught up with, you've got to maintain a North Star. Now, that could be while you're innovating your way into something that was unexpected, but maintain that focus. Secondly, you've got to permanently learn to unlearn, because some of the reasons that organizations and individuals don't make more changes is because we get stuck with what we know. So you have to maintain this bias towards trying to unlearn some of what you know. Thirdly, take advantage of huge opportunities like pandemics. For some, it's been a break, right? Many of us have spent a lot more time at home, so maybe we're doing more self-improvement stuff, either personal or through the home. Take advantage of these. Fourthly is, we know we've got to innovate to grow. I talked about that metric before. There's a 30% value add in organizations. So if innovation is not part of what you do every day or every week, then you'll grow less. Fifthly, practice solidarity. This is Chloe's point. Actually, we need to kind of collaborate for support, but also to get new ideas and to look to help as well as to kind of learn. And lastly, continually expand your comfort zone, right? Crisis forces people out of the comfort zone, but so what? If you're not doing it all the time, and this is not about having pandemics all the time, but it's about making sure the way you work allows you to continually expand that comfort zone. Look, just in the remaining moments, let me come back to you, Anita, and say, what are your final messages to our global audience about things they need to do to continue to innovate, have peace of mind, but make progress whilst we're struggling?
Okay. My last word is that I think a smart city is a very trendy word, but especially in my organization called Global Organization of Smart City. But for me, that even Taipei was ranked number 8 by IMD for smart cities. But for me, that the moment that made me more proud is that it's not when I say, oh, that's smart, it's when I say that's sweet, because I feel I cared as a citizen and my problem was solved and my feeling was taken care. So I think that's being sweet is more important than being smart. That's something I want to say.
So we take us out with your final message.
Yeah.
Language is really important. So if we think about our brains, we're always using them. But if we're in an impossible brain, like, oh, this can't be done, this has never been done before, we've always done it this way, then we can't actually move forward. So we need to switch into the possible brain. But what if I did know? What things could I do if I did have this information or data, or if we could change the way we do things? So really thinking about that, because then we can shift the language, shift the terminology, and then actually be able to move forward. Because when we're stuck in overwhelm, we can't actually have the right conversations to move forward.
And that's how to maintain city innovation in the time of a pandemic. Anita, Zoe, thank you so much for joining me. And look, thank you, audience, for the opportunity for us to share some thoughts which hopefully help. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.